I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to part 2 of Homeschool Oklahoma's series on You Can Homeschool. Tonight we're going to focus on preschool and elementary ages, and we're excited to have Crystal Wagner join us to be our speaker tonight. And Crystal hosts the All in a Homeschool Day podcast, where she shares about the challenges and the joys of homeschooling. She loves helping parents through the various stages of their homeschool journey, including deciding if homeschooling is a good fit for their family, getting started with confidence, and overcoming barriers to productive homeschool days. Her mission is to help homeschool moms simplify so they can homeschool with confidence and joy. Crystal and her husband Jason live here in Oklahoma and homeschool their 2 daughters. And I'm going to turn it over to Crystal.
Thank you, Renee. It is a pleasure to be here with everybody. I'm going to get my screen sharing here. All right, so everybody should be able to see my screen. Crystal, let me know if that's not the case.
It looks great.
All right. Well, I wanted to just let you know my girls are 12 and 15. We have homeschooled them from the beginning. So we have been homeschooling officially for about 10 years now. And I'm really excited to talk to you tonight about how you can homeschool with confidence and joy. You probably have a lot of questions about homeschooling and if this would be a good fit for your family. And in this workshop, we're going to cover 5 questions that you should consider when you make this important decision. We'll look at what does a day in the homeschool life look like? Is homeschooling a good fit for your family? What qualifications do you need to homeschool? What steps do you need to take to get started? And how can you confidently make decisions and face tough times? So let's start by just defining what homeschooling is. Homeschooling is an educational alternative to public or private school in which parents direct the education of their children. They get to choose the curriculum and resources from which their children will learn. They evaluate their children's understanding and can make adjustments as needed to ensure that their children are getting their educational needs met. They also get to set the school calendar and the school day schedule that best meets the needs of their children. Now, homeschooling looks different for every family, but the constant is that parents have the primary responsibility for their children's education, and they are able to make choices and decisions that best meet their children's needs. Because homeschooling is so individualized, even different children within the same family, their day may look different. There's no such thing as a typical homeschool day. Parents can tailor their children's education to meet their individual needs, so every child's homeschool experience will be slightly different. However, one thing is true across the board. A homeschool day is significantly less than a traditional school day because your child is learning in a one-on-one mentoring environment that allows him to learn at his own pace. These time guidelines are to give you a general sense of how long your child might spend on learning each day. Now, learning happens throughout the day and all the time, whether we are sitting down for formal learning or not. These time estimates are really just how long you could expect your children to be spending on that academic learning. As you'll notice, the younger your child, the less time you need to spend with that formal learning. And you'll actually spend the majority of that time working alongside your child. As he matures, his time will increase and you will be able to teach him to assume responsibility for completing his own lessons. And so you will spend less time directly involved with your child. Now, during their lesson times, your children will study the same subjects that public and private school students study, such as reading, writing, math, science, history, geography, but you have more flexibility as to how they cover those subjects. Most families utilize a variety of resources, including textbooks, hands-on projects, living books, games, and even field trips. And you can take advantage of the technology that we have available today, such as supplemental videos, learning apps, and online classes. It's important to have a balanced approach when you incorporate the technology, especially in the younger years. But using a variety of these resources, you have the opportunity to bring learning to life and help your child develop a lifelong love of learning. You also have flexibility as to when your child will study specific concepts, such as time periods in history or topics in science. Because of that, instead of having to coordinate individual subjects for every single child, you can conduct a one-room schoolhouse with all of your children studying the same material for subjects such as history, science, geography, literature. The whole family, for example, could learn about the Pilgrim's treacherous journey across the Atlantic when you read Pilgrim stories aloud to your whole family. Younger children can then enjoy learning about the Pilgrim Children's Day through the picture book series by Kate Waters. And your older children can learn about William Bradford through the Childhood of Famous Americans book series. Having everyone study the same topic at the same time enriches your family's discussions and it simplifies your homeschool planning. Plus, you will be creating amazing bonds as your children get to explore these topics together and they get to tell dad about what they're learning whenever you have family dinners. Now, after they complete their academic lessons, because as we saw, that will not take very much of their day, your children can spend the remainder of their day exploring nature, learning about subjects in which they're interested, or just playing, which actually builds brain connections that help promote future learning. Some families place limits on screen time to encourage their children to use their imagination and actively explore their world. While this looks different for every family, general guidelines could be to include no screen time until all academic schoolwork has been completed, your children have read something outside of their schoolwork, and they've been physically active. This helps them to keep a balanced approach to their day. Now, during their free hours, your children will discover new interests and passions which may develop into a career or at least a lifelong interest. And because they're not required to choose between a very limited number of options, their interests can be vastly different for each child. One of my daughters has taken sewing lessons as part of her homeschool curriculum. She's also spent a lot of her time exploring new sewing techniques and fashion through the ages. Another one of her interests is nursing, and she is interested in becoming a nurse when she grows up. So we incorporated into her history lessons last year a study of nursing uniforms throughout the time periods. Her final project was to create a visual timeline and sew a nursing uniform for her American Girl doll. She's now this week making a Victorian walking skirt for herself, and she had time in her free time to make some face masks for all of us to wear when we need to leave the house. My other daughter is very different. She does not want to have anything to do with sewing, but she loves math, patterns, and exploring how things work. She started volunteering in her free time with our church's audiovisual team and has become very involved in that team. She loves that tech aspect and taught herself how to run the light board. And during her free time, she explored that light board specifically so that she could learn how to reprogram it, which made working the light board easier for everybody else, as well as incorporated more complex lighting patterns that enhance our worship experience. She also enjoys exploring new mathematical patterns and algorithms in her free time. So as you can see, their interests are very different, but they have time to explore those in detail. Now, all children learn differently. Some are auditory learners and they prefer hearing, whether you read a book to them or they like to hear an explanation or listen to an audiobook. Others are visual learners and they prefer reading material for themselves. All children benefit from incorporating movement into their learning, but some are even more kinesthetic than others and really need that movement to learn at their best. It is important to help your children develop all of those skills, but when you homeschool, you have the ability to allow them to focus on the one that is easiest for them. You can incorporate those audiobooks and independent reading for visual learners. You can let your kinesthetic learner bounce on a ball, jump on a trampoline, or sit on an exercise ball. There have been so many days that I have been reading lessons aloud when my girls were younger, when one or both of them were bouncing up and down on an exercise ball. It takes a little bit of skill to be able to read with that distraction, but when we finished the reading, they could tell me what we had read, and I knew that they had understood it at a much deeper level because I was allowing them to learn in a way that met their needs. Now, your homeschool day will look different if you have toddlers or preschoolers around than if your children are all school aged. It's helpful to begin your homeschool day by focusing your attention on your youngest students. Spend some time one-on-one with them and let them feel loved and have their love tank filled up before you move on. Then you can provide your toddlers and preschoolers with quiet, age-appropriate activities that they can do next to you while everyone else is doing their schoolwork. And many homeschool families actually complete the more challenging work or work that requires more concentration when younger children are having a nap or quiet time. Initially, this may make your homeschool feel a little chaotic as you train your younger children to play quietly for short periods. And you may need to lower your expectations of how much you can accomplish when you're first getting started and focus on just accomplishing the basics. Eventually, though, you will find a rhythm to your homeschool days that will meet the needs of all of your children. Now, not only does homeschooling allow you flexibility in terms of what, when, and how your children will learn, you have the flexibility of where to learn. The vast majority of our learning does take place at home, and a lot of it is at our kitchen table. But it's not uncommon to see my children all over the house, sitting on the couch, sometimes when they were younger, hanging upside down from the couch. They might be in the yard, or we might go to the park. They might be swinging in their hammock. We have also taken our schoolwork with us to grandparents who live out of state when we've had to go help them after a surgery. And we've taken it with us on trips. Most of our travel time, we don't spend on our typical schoolwork that we do at home. We take some of that with us, what we need to do to keep moving forward, such as math. But the majority of it is actually learning about the places where we travel. It's an excellent opportunity to bring nature study and geography to life. There's a lot of flexibility that you have as to how, when, what, and where your children learn when you homeschool. Now, in addition to academics, you will be able to invest time to improve your child's character. You can help them develop habits that will make your homeschool day run smoother, such as obedience, observation, and attention. And as he spends his days closely interacting with you and his siblings, you can help him learn to respect and serve others. He can also learn to manage his time and assume responsibility for himself. There are many days that character training, especially in the elementary grades, may seem to consume your entire day and you accomplish very little academic learning. It may appear that you're not accomplishing much, but I want to remind you to keep your objectives in mind. And remember that when you invest in character training in the elementary grades, it makes your high school years so much smoother. I still can remember the days when I felt initially like they were failures because I was simply correcting behavior and getting through these difficult, challenging situations with one child after another having an outburst. But now our homeschool days run so much smoother because I committed to investing that time to train their character. So, how much time will you really need to devote to homeschooling? Well, it will take a significant amount of your time. You'll need to plan what and when your children learn, direct and supervise their learning, and evaluate their understanding. And as I mentioned earlier, when they're younger, you will need to be more directly involved in their school day. As they mature, you'll still plan what they learn and you'll still evaluate their understanding, but they will complete the majority of their work independently. So these time commitments are averages, but you can see that you'll have about 10 to 15 hours per year planning lessons, about a half hour each week preparing for the upcoming week, 3 to 5 hours a day, depending on the age of your child, supervising lessons and life skills chores, and several hours at the end of each term, wrapping up that term and preparing for the next one. And you're entering a new profession. You should also add in some time for continuing education. That could be as simple as reading a book about the educational philosophy that you'll follow or child development. You could take an online course in a homeschool specific or parenting topic, and you could attend a homeschool convention such as the Homeschool Oklahoma convention. Now, you may be wondering, okay, with all this time I need to spend on homeschooling, how am I going to keep the house clean, prepare meals, get laundry done, and take care of myself? Well, you'll need to get a little creative, but you can enlist the help of grandparents and friends. You could have your spouse help whenever they come home from work. You could also coordinate with several friends to have a homeschool Mother's Day out. We did this a number of years ago, and there were 4 moms that participated. So once a month, all of the kids would go to one house. So 3 moms were able to have multiple hours without children. You could run errands, you could catch up on chores at home, you could take a nap uninterrupted. It was a great opportunity for the kids to get to play. They had a great time. And we only had 1 month out of 4 that we had the kids at our house. So you may need to get a little creative, but there are ways to find that time to accomplish what you need to do. And don't forget that you need to get your kids involved. They need to be helping with those household chores. Teach them from an early age how to clean up their belongings, how to help you prepare meals. Yes, it will take more time initially, but as they become more proficient, they can help share in the burden of caring for your house and preparing the meals and everything else that is involved in running a household. Now, possibly the most important investment of your time will be that of developing relationships with your children. Instead of spending the evenings helping them with homework when everybody is tired, cranky, and hungry, you can accomplish their schoolwork in the mornings when everyone is fresh and at their best, and then spend the evenings playing games, reading books together. There have been numerous evenings where we have rousing games of balloon volleyball. And the memories that we create whenever we do that are going to last a lifetime. I know many parents dread the teenage years, and when my girls were younger, I was a little concerned about having 2 teenage daughters at once. I had heard the stories of teenagers who rebelled and how they didn't want to spend time with their family and just generally how challenging it was. And at the time when I had a preschooler and a toddler, I was thinking, I don't see how it can get much more challenging than this. But now, my husband and I thoroughly enjoy spending time with our daughters, and our daughters genuinely enjoy spending time with us. We can't take all the credit, but I do know that the special bonds that we have been able to create through the many hours of learning together and having fun together have played a significant role in developing these meaningful relationships. So, is homeschooling a good fit for your family? You've seen what a day in the homeschool life looks like. Let's ask some questions that many parents ask about homeschooling. First, homeschooling benefits children of all academic abilities. Traditional classroom settings were designed to meet the needs of the average student. This prevents problems for children on both ends of the spectrum, whether they have an insatiable appetite for learning and they are gifted learners, or if they're struggling learners and they have some challenges when it comes to their academic lessons. Both children on both ends of those spectrums flourish in a homeschool environment because we can provide an education that's tailored to their needs. If your child is struggling, for example, maybe he's struggling to read, you could read his lessons aloud to him or allow him to listen to an audiobook. If your child is struggling with math, you can work directly with him to make sure that he understands the concepts before moving on so that he doesn't have future problems because he didn't understand the lesson. And gifted learners face some unique challenges that you can address in a homeschool setting. If your child becomes bored in a traditional classroom, then he could learn at a faster pace, or he could dig deeper into particular topics that interest him. You can also help him develop the skills of perseverance and excellence, encouraging him to achieve his best instead of simply to pass a test. And this will help him whenever he is later in high school and college and studying more difficult material. And the reality is, most children have mixed academic abilities. They excel in some areas, and other subjects, they struggle a little bit. It's just a matter of their natural tendencies and talents. So, homeschooling allows you to design a flexible educational plan where they can move faster in those areas where they excel and move at their own pace in the areas where they struggle a little bit. Now, most parents initially wonder if their children will be well socialized if they homeschool. And this is a valid question until you understand what it really means to be well socialized and the different ways that this can be accomplished. Merriam-Webster defines to socialize as to fit or train for a social environment, adapt to social needs and uses, and to participate actively in a social group. So, to be socialized means that you can interact with people of different ages and different backgrounds while observing social customs. Children in a classroom setting primarily learn how to follow the social rules that relate to their age and their classroom. They're often uncomfortable talking to and interacting with people of different ages, whereas homeschool children interact with children of all ages during the week when they go to friends' houses, whenever they're at co-ops, and they typically interact with adults throughout their week as they go through the activities with their parents. A comment that I often hear is that people are impressed with how comfortable homeschool children are in a variety of situations. Now, public and private school students can also achieve this level of comfort and socialization, but parents will have to be very intentional to expose their children to these different interactions and to people of different ages. It doesn't happen inside a classroom. Now, homeschooling is not a good fit for every family. You may not have been expecting me to tell you that in this workshop, but I want to tell you about a couple of situations that you should think hard about if you meet one of these. The first is if both parents do not agree that homeschooling is a good option. It is possible to homeschool if you and your spouse disagree, but it will cause tension in your home that will affect your children's educational journey and possibly their emotional state. If you don't agree, I encourage you to spend some time discussing your concerns, your motivations, and your desires. Begin praying and asking that God would provide clear direction for both of you and that He would give you peace as you wait for Him to bring a unified decision. And if at all possible, you should both agree that homeschooling would be a good option for your family. It may help you to remember that this does not have to be a long-term commitment. You can decide to try it out for a year and then reevaluate before the next school year. The second situation is if there is significant conflict between your family members. That could be between spouses or between parents and children. The homeschool environment provides an opportunity to address and correct minor character and behavioral issues. But if these issues are significant, the added stress of homeschooling may actually amplify the problems instead of helping you to resolve them. If you fall into this situation, you may want to consider seeking counseling or addressing these issues before you start homeschooling. And the final situation is if homeschooling would cause a serious financial strain on your home because of the elimination of one income. Homeschooling is not as expensive as attending private school, but there are some expenses involved to purchase curriculum and supplies. And if you lose one income because a spouse is staying home to care for and direct the education of your children. Now, it's difficult to provide an average amount that homeschool families spend on their homeschool expenses because families classify their expenses a little differently. But on average, you can expect to spend between $200 to $700 per child per year. Many homeschool families do rely on a single income and they find creative ways to manage their finances. So this is not a barrier, but you may need to work towards the goal of relying on that single income or finding a way to supplement your income before making a commitment to homeschool. If you find yourself in one of these situations, this may not be the right season for you to begin homeschooling. You should consider doing some more research and putting plans in place to mitigate some of these situations and circumstances. With creativity and perseverance, it does work for most families and it provides that flexibility we've been talking about that really benefits most children. So by now you may be thinking homeschooling might be a good fit for us, but you're not so sure you're cut out to be a homeschool mom. Well, probably 95% of homeschool moms have used one of these following statements as a reason why they couldn't homeschool. I'm not smart enough. How will I teach my children subjects I don't know anything about? I'm not organized. I'm not patient enough. I'm too easily frazzled. Or my children won't obey me now. I'm afraid they won't listen to me and respect me as their teacher. Do you identify with one or more of those statements? Well, rest assured, you are not alone. It's important for you to consider your needs as well as your children's. After all, homeschooling is not just about your children. Homeschool moms quickly come to realize they benefit in many ways also. One of the top concerns that homeschool moms have is that they're not capable and qualified to teach their children. You don't need a degree to teach your child at home. Dr. Brian Ray of the National Home Education Research Institute found that student achievement scores were not dependent on the level of education or qualifications of homeschool moms. And in fact, homeschool students consistently score 15 to 30 percentile points above public and private school students on standardized achievement tests. Many colleges actively recruit homeschool students because they've seen how well they can perform. So how will you teach your children subjects about which you know very little? Thankfully, you don't need to be an expert to teach your children at home. Your role as a homeschool teacher is actually to facilitate your children's education, not to know everything that your child needs to learn. And as a facilitator, you will find the resources that your children need to learn the best way for them to succeed. You might incorporate books, documentaries, field trips, and tutors to help your children learn about a subject. You could enlist the help of an older sibling. A spouse could teach a lesson in the evening, or you could have grandparents help out with a subject that they are particularly passionate about. And living in this digital age, the number of resources that are available to homeschool families is very vast. Now, you may not remember much of what you learned in school. That's okay. Most of us don't. We are actually very grateful for the opportunity to be relearning all of these subjects alongside of our children. I have learned so much science and history as either I've read aloud to them or as they've come and told me what they have been learning about. And there will be times that your child comes to you bubbling over with joy and excitement over something that they've learned. You only need a willingness to learn and a desire to facilitate your child's educational journey. Are you worried that you might leave some gaps in your child's education? A lot of homeschool moms worry about that. We want to make sure that our children are prepared for college and a profession. So we want to make sure that they learn everything that they need to know. Unfortunately, you won't be able to teach them everything. There will be gaps in their education. But that's true for public and private school students as well. There are gaps in everyone's education. The aim of education is not to teach everything one needs to know to get into college, but rather to instill a love of learning and to teach a child how to learn and how to think. When you do that, your children can learn whatever they need to know whenever they need to learn it. You can cultivate this habit by encouraging your children to learn about subjects that interest them, encouraging them to strive for excellence instead of simply completing a lesson or passing a test. And be excited and interested in what your child chooses to study and learn about in his free time. Even if it doesn't interest you, ask questions and listen to them as they explain what they learned. I guarantee I did not initially have an interest in World War II nursing uniforms or in lighting boards, but I've learned a lot in the process, and I've actually filled in for my daughter when she needed to be doing something else in the service. She taught me how to run the light boards. So I was able to participate in her excitement as she was learning. Now, as long as you are intentional and motivated, you can be your child's best teacher. After all, you know your child best. You know his strengths and his weaknesses. You are motivated by a love for your child to provide what's best for him as you seek to find out how he learns best and what he needs to succeed. This flexible one-on-one mentoring situation that homeschooling provides has so many benefits for your child. One is like we've been talking about, he can learn using his preferred learning style, which is especially important for those auditory and kinesthetic learners who often struggle in a classroom setting designed for visual learners. It also takes less time for your child to learn what he needs to learn. You're not spending time on administrative tasks. And you have immediate feedback from both parent and child as to how your child is understanding and whether you need to move faster or slow down to meet his needs. Many homeschools utilize a mastery approach where a child continues work on his lessons and does not move forward until he has mastered or understands the material. This helps to ensure that your child has that building block foundation and doesn't have holes in his understanding that might prevent him from continuing on in his understanding later. So this individualized approach to education allows you to provide that learning environment that best meets your child's needs. Now, one more aspect about being a facilitator is setting the tone of your home. We all want to have a calm, peaceful home atmosphere. We want to have a home that's organized and tidy. We want our children to obey and respect us. And we'd like to have more patience with them. Let's be honest, that's difficult to do. And when you add in that you're homeschooling, you're with them 24/7, it can sometimes seem impossible. So, what's a mom to do? Well, I try to keep in mind the concept that is attributed to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, be a thermostat, not a thermometer. A thermometer merely reflects the environment around it. When the temperature in the room rises, the mercury in the thermometer rises too. And when the temperature drops, the mercury goes back down. A thermostat, however, influences the environment. When the temperature starts to heat up, you can adjust the temperature setting down, and that will cause the air conditioning to kick on and cool the room off. You can apply this to your home and your homeschool as well. When I first heard this quote, my daughters were young. They were 4 and 7. They certainly kept me on my toes and gave me many opportunities to put this concept into practice. When they were disobedient or disrespectful, I had to pause and take a breath so that I could calmly redirect them. It wasn't easy, but I learned how to be a thermostat. I learned that when I gave clear and concise directions, I knew my daughters knew what they were supposed to do, and it was no longer a point of discussion. I simply needed to be consistent in enforcing what I told them to do. I learned that this concept of being the thermostat and not a thermometer actually helped me become more patient and less frazzled. Yes, I was one of those moms. who said, I am not patient enough to homeschool. In fact, I remember where I was sitting and with whom I was sitting when I said those words. And God has given me so many opportunities to build my patience over the years as I have been working with my children and trying to be the thermostat. I have been able to motivate them to also be the thermostat. And in the process, I'm becoming a better homeschool facilitator. I feel more confident and capable in my abilities. So, getting started with homeschooling is actually pretty simple. Your first step should be to learn about the requirements of your state. So I'm going to go over these for Oklahoma in just a minute, but you can find all of these details on the Homeschool Legal Defense Association's website at www.hslda.org. So in Oklahoma, your children are required to be in an educational setting, whether it is a public or private school or a homeschool setting, between the ages of 5 and 18. If they have previously been in a school setting, you need to send a certified letter withdrawing them from the school district. And you can find a sample of that either on the HSLDA website or on the Homeschool Oklahoma website. There's no reporting or testing requirements other than we need to have 180 days of education, and we need to cover subjects that are similar to the public schools, such as math, language arts, science, and social studies. That leaves you a lot of flexibility as to how you're going to approach your homeschool. What they do recommend is keeping attendance records and a portfolio or sample of your child's work. And this can be as simple as having a calendar and you check off the days that you attend school, that you have lessons, and tally them up, make sure that you have 180 days for your school year. Keep a journal of what you do each day, and portfolio can be you taking pictures of your child's work or including samples of their math or their writing. It's not, it doesn't have to be a super fancy activity. I actually just take ours and put them into a scrapbook binder at the end of each year. Now, the next step you need to do is to find a support system. There are many support groups on Facebook that you can join, whether it is a local Oklahoma one in your area, or a more nationwide support group that is focused on your particular educational philosophy. And these can be a valuable resource, but I also encourage you to find that local support group. Most communities have multiple options, and so you may need to visit several until you find the one that's a good fit for you and your children. And a mentor is an invaluable resource. My mentor has helped me numerous times on our educational journey, both with homeschool issues I was having as well as parenting issues. So finding that mentor may take you a little time, but that can be one of the steps that you work towards. Now, don't worry about finding a curriculum or a homeschool planner right away. You and your children will need some time to transition to this new lifestyle and this new way of learning. Spend a couple of months reading together, playing games, taking field trips, and exploring. You might want to go visit some of those museums and historical sites in your area that you just never had time to go to. You can find more activity suggestions of what to do in my homeschooling quick start checklist that you can download for free on my website at triumphantlearning.com/quick start guide. This would also be an excellent time for you to invest in training your children how to help with chores around the house and how to obey. During these transition months, you can begin researching different homeschooling methods and philosophies and see which ones resonate with you and might be a good fit for your family. And above all, relax. Remember that this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. You don't need to leave the gate running at full speed ahead. Start slow and find a rhythm to your days. Savor and appreciate the moments that you have with your children as you invest in your relationships and get to know them again. It may be helpful to remember the advice from Gretchen Rubin. She said the days are long, but the years are short. Your days may seem chaotic and without direction as you're finding your groove and getting going, but start slowly and find your way and know that you will get there. Now, there are so many decisions that you need to make for your homeschool. We've talked about some of these. You're going to have doubts. You're going to face difficult situations. So, how will you know that you've made the right choices? Well, the answer is to construct your homeschool decision making framework. To put it simply, you need to write out your homeschool mission statement or your homeschool why. Your homeschool mission statement will provide guidance and a reminder of what you're trying to achieve. It becomes a litmus test against which you can evaluate decisions that are related to your homeschool. As I look back on my experience teaching my daughter to read, I am so thankful that my husband and I sat down at the beginning of our homeschool journey and invested the time to develop our mission statement. My daughter was a struggling reader until she turned 11. It wasn't for a lack of trying. We started reading lessons when she turned 6 and spent the next 5 years working on sight words and phonics and visual discrimination skills and gross motor skills and sensory skills. We had an evaluation to see if she had learning issues that we needed to address. Basically, we did everything we could to ensure that she had the skills that she needed to learn to read, but it just wasn't clicking. Well, two of the values on our homeschool mission statement are for our children to learn at their own pace and to master what they're learning, regardless of how long it takes to master it. We knew our daughter would learn to read. She was just going to learn at her own pace. And so we gave her time and space to do that. And we are thankful that homeschooling allowed us this flexibility. We never stopped trying, but we did take a gentle and developmentally appropriate approach. I read her lessons aloud to her. She listened to so many audio books, and we waited for that switch to flip. It was difficult to not worry that we were making the decisions that would best meet her educational needs. I sometimes worried we needed to do more. I worried what others would think. For example, Sunday school teachers or camp counselors. I didn't want her to be stressed and worried about what other kids would be saying. But I was not stressed about her learning to read. I knew it would happen. I just knew that she would do it at her own pace. And she did master the skill of reading. And now she considers herself a proficient reader and devours books, just like her sister does. I wasn't stressed because I had our homeschool mission statement to guide us. Now, as you embark on your homeschool journey, I encourage you to make writing your homeschool mission statement a priority. Schedule a weekend away from your kids or plan time to work on it several evenings after they go to bed. Brainstorm your answers to these 6 questions. You don't have to worry about scribbling them down right now. If you go to my website at triumphantlearning.com/homeschool mission statement, you can find these 6 questions as well as our answers and our homeschool mission statement to give you a little sample of what yours might look like. And you do not have to have all of these questions answered and a polished mission statement before you start homeschooling. You can continue to revise it as you learn about the various educational philosophies and as you live out some homeschool days. But having this as a starting point will give you that guidance and direction you need to start making decisions. Once you have your draft, make it be your secret weapon that you can use for your decision-making framework. And when you're faced with choices about which curriculum to use or which activities to participate in, ask if they will help you achieve the goals on your mission statement. You'll no longer make decisions based on fear, guilt, or shame. You can be confident in your decisions. And other homeschool moms may start asking you how you can be so confident and certain in the decisions that you make. I want to wrap up tonight by giving you a little bit of help for the current crazy times that we're living in right now. You're probably familiar with the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, I would like to propose the 4 R's for our pandemic times. Remember to relax. Help your children continue learning and complete any necessary assignments that have been given to you by school districts or that you're finishing out from the current year, but relax and don't stress about their academic achievement. A few months interruption is unlikely to negatively impact your child's education. And remember that we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to figure this out and figure out a new way of living. Find creative ways instead to make learning fun for your children and incorporate games and hands-on activities and reading living books. You can find some suggestions for these on my website. And read with your children. Encourage them to read on their own or to listen to audiobooks. They can learn so much just by reading living books. And find a rhythm to your days. Have time for them to read something, to be physically active, and to help with chores around the house. Avoid scheduling every spare minute for them and allow them to engage in masterly inactivity. Masterly inactivity is when your children have time to explore and learn on their own without you directing their activities and their efforts. You may need to put some parameters around what they can do during that time and limit their screen time, but encourage them to explore on their own. And also use this time to invest in relationships. Talk with your children and find out what's bothering them right now about the current situation. How can you help them cope with these stresses and frustrations? Spend time doing things that they enjoy and that can foster your family bonding, and help them connect with friends and family through a video call or phone call or the good old-fashioned letters through the snail mail. This can be a time that you can focus on these 4 R's to help your whole family get through these challenging times. I'd love to connect with you more and continue this conversation about deciding if homeschooling is a good fit for your family. And if so, how you can get started. You can find resources on my website at triumphantlearning.com. And I share tips and a glimpse into our homeschool on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me at Triumphant Learning. And this fall, my podcast, All in a Homeschool Day, will start back up, and I'll talk about how to juggle the demands of homeschooling while also running your household and still finding time to be mom and take care of yourself. It's a real-life look at finding balance that's right for your family. So I'm going to go out of my screen here, and we'll open that back up for questions, I believe.
Thank you, Crystal. Yes, we're going to take some time, and if anyone has any questions, we'll see what we can do to answer those.
Hi there. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out this technology thing. I do have a question. We are just beginning our homeschool journey, starting kindergarten in the fall. I also have a 2-year-old son who is a very spunky monkey. How do you guys balance working with your older children who do need the calmer environment, but while engaging younger sibling, kind of balancing between the two?
Well, we did something when my girls were younger that I called the 10-minute lessons. And so we would, I would work directly with one of my daughters for 10 minutes, because whenever they're young, that you don't need to spend very long at a time on a lesson. And we would focus very much during that 10 minutes. And during that time, my other daughter could be off playing or doing something else. And then when we finished, my older daughter could go play for 10 minutes, and I'd set a timer. And if partly the timer was for my accountability so that I didn't get busy doing other things around the house, but also if she didn't come back at the end of the 10 minutes, then she didn't get her next 10-minute playtime. So it was a good way for us to work on training all of us to be attentive during that time. And my younger one was able to know that, okay, in 10 or 15 minutes, she didn't really understand the concept of time, but she knew that after this little set of time, she would get to have time with mom again, and we could do something a little louder and more active. And so it was a good way for us to balance the two.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
All right, does anyone else have any questions? Well, Crystal, I want to really thank you for joining us tonight and for all that helpful information. If you have any questions, please email us, and we will conclude for the evening. Thank you, everyone.